So I'm assuming this is working. I don't look very well at all. I think that's basically because I don't feel very well at all. I've been sick for 6 months. However, I wanted to leave something after a lifetime of thinking. I firmly believe that the foundation of physics with regard to the origins of energy and gravity are false. It was simply assumed about 130 years ago that energy is derived from matter itself, that matter is being induced to surrender energy. By following Einstein's original works, long before everything was called into question in the 1920s and especially the 1930s, I think Albert was after symmetry more than anything else, on the relationships of gravity, energy, light, and three-dimensional reality. And by examining every issue on that question with regard strictly to interpretation of foundation, not its practical reality, but the foundation of the manifestations of energy, I came to the conclusion that energy exists of itself in its own dimension. By energy, I mean radiant energy, what is commonly referred to as electrons, photons, and so on, that it is the interaction of matter that enables energy to become manifest. When that interaction ceases, then the actualization of energy itself ceases, such as cranking a hand crank dynamo. Or lightning, the manifestation of lightning from the low velocity excitation of molecules of air. How does such a tremendous amount of energy become manifest by such actions, just by the atmosphere? The common accepted doctrine is that energy potentials of positive and negative create such a great amount of distortion that lightning is manifested momentarily, very momentarily. The part that we see, that we perceive, is just superheated ionized gases, not the energy itself. That was there for such a brief instant, your eyes could barely glimpse it. So I wondered, how can this be? That a low order magnitude of velocity of air could induce such a thing to occur. The manifestation of the energy. And the answer is, the energy is not coming from the earth nor the atmosphere. There is not unequal polarities between the two, or the creation of a superdensity of polarities. No. What it is the actions of matter itself. That's what caused it. What do I mean by the actions of matter? The interactions of matter either in low or high order velocities in relationship to each other, atoms and molecular components. Obviously, a thunderstorm is not occurring at a subatomic level. It's atoms, molecules actually, that are moving. and they're not moving particularly fast. Generally, you're looking at wind velocities of less than, say 100 miles an hour, just to pull a figure out. I've always wondered about that. I wondered about batteries. Why do batteries lose their ability, such as this common storage battery, a 9-volt, a D cell? Why does it lose its ability so readily and yet undergo no substantial physical manifestation of change of itself? It's still there. All the matter is still there. It hasn't gone anywhere. It was transformed. Which portion was transformed and how? So thinking on that led me to think on it more and more along the lines of matter touching other bits of matter. And by bits, I mean both molecular, atomic, and possibly subatomic levels, however tiny matter can become. My goodness, I don't look very well at all. No, I don't. Like my hands shake so bad now I can't even shave. I could remember to do it. I can't stand on my feet. My right foot and leg have become so occluded with blood clots. Despite a successful previous surgery, they came back, and they came back in a majority rather than just one or two. Now I think there's several of them, especially in my thigh. And about the only pain reliever I have for this is alcohol and aspirin. The pain is 24/7. It won't let me sleep without getting drunk first. And even that's for 2 or 3 hours. Okay, back to the topic at hand. I was thinking in terms of the actuality of energy itself, rather than just the matter. And I came up with the answer of the energy exists everywhere and everywhen, all throughout the known universe, everywhere. Because it exists in its own dimension that does not interact with this dimension unless it is stimulated to become manifest. And that would involve the interaction of matter with other matter. By that predicate, that would mean energy is limitless. It is neither created nor destroyed. It simply is. It's a manifestation of something that exists in some other dimension that we normally have no awareness of at all. You can't perceive it. You can't really see it until it's manifested. Hold on a moment. I've got a stray eyelash here. I'm not terribly concerned with my looks at this point in life, since I have so little of it left. Very little. I'm very ill, and I'm tired of being crippled. Back on track. If energy exists of itself, how can we verify it? What would be some scientific, observable, provable, demonstrable method of being able to state that energy exists of itself within its own dimension, which is completely independent of our three-dimensional reality? There is no height or breadth, no density, no weight. It doesn't exist in that sort of reality. It is what it is of itself, all forms of energy. And by that I mean radiant energy as well. I think, well, what could be a demonstrable proof that people could readily understand? And I came up with what's above our heads, the sun, our sun itself. How can it persist at such a tremendous power level, output of power, or the creation of power of its own substance, without rapidly annihilating itself? Standard doctrine states perhaps 4 to 7 tons per second. is being either annihilated or changed into a different form of matter, such as hydrogen to helium or helium to hydrogen, whichever way you want to work it back and forth in a constant ping pong fashion. I don't agree with that, because by that tenet, by saying X amount is destroyed, you have to apply it to the entire mass, not just one tiny portion, say 1 square kilometer or 1 square mile of the sun is undergoing this transformation all the time, endlessly, ceaselessly. And that by that predicate, the sun will sooner or later exhaust itself. And when it does that, it will expand, contract, or very possibly simply detonate and tear itself apart and fly out in all directions of space. I don't agree with that philosophy. I don't think that's what's happening. I think we think that because of the other supposition that matter is being transformed into energy, we believe, therefore, some various stages of entropy will be mandated, and the sun, and just as it, same as it would for all stars, have to destroy itself in some form or fashion. We're not sure because we've never actually witnessed it. We think we've seen what happens after, but we don't know the time intervals that occurred, nor how it began. That is why I cannot, I've tried and tried for about 24, 25 years now to try and comprehend how this process could be applied to the entire substance of a given mass like a star. And by that predicate, maintain the idea of mass, matter into energy. And that will end at some point, just as it does for all the things that we create. If you stop turning a generator handle or hand crank a generator, it'll stop producing electricity. That philosophy, mechanical motion or mechanical energy, and at a smaller level, chemical energy. The interactions between ionized particulates inside, say, a 9-volt battery that eventually exhausts itself and has to be either recharged, if that's possible, depending on what its construction is, or discarded because it can no longer function. However, if you were to take that same battery, carefully take it apart, you would find everything's still there. It would have the same weight that it started with when you took it out of a little plastic blister pack. Took it very carefully apart, being careful not to lose any component thereof, and reconstructed that battery as it was made in a factory, put the components back together, it would work again. There's no practical way to do that without spending a very great deal of time, money, and effort to do it. Rather pointless. We already know that that works. It's been tried on a simple basis, but of course it's been tried. Not on an industrial basis, you'd be losing a lot of money attempting to do that, to recycle the same battery over and over. But it can be done. If that's true, and it is true, then none of the qualities and aspects needed to transform matter into energy were lost. So it shouldn't work at all. That's already gone. That the energy, the potential that it had was exhausted. There's a mandate on how much energy it can produce, and then that comes to an end. And beyond that point, there will be no more energy. You can wait a very long time and you still won't get any energy out of it. So I'm applying that same train of thought to a star like ours. You can say, well, that's wrong. It's just flat out wrong. That's what's happening. It's not what's happening at all. We have thermonuclear fusion and fission occurring all the time there. Well, by the standards of observation, yes, it would seem that way. But that's not necessarily exactly what's going on, because we're using an accepted protocol of observation that only confirms what we thought was happening. There's no paradigm for going over here or going over that way or looking up or looking down. No, there's just an accepted mandate of this is what you should be looking for. If you're looking for specific things, you'll find those specific things one way or another, especially if you tailor and fit an answer to fit a preconceived expectation. I think that gradually, over time, however long that may be, the sun will distort itself. It can only perform so many cycles of evolution, and that process begins to break down, becomes chaotic. Because of that event, other things start to happen, and it becomes more and more, the chaos becomes a greater propagant wave factor, which may be very slow or very quick, depending on the quality of time interval and speed that you want to use to it. I think it usually takes a very long time, far longer than we've existed. Using that as something of a base, I came to the conclusion that all of the energy that we use or that we see and that we perceive, even wearing a pair of leather shoes across a wool carpet, and which doesn't occur anymore. Nobody wears leather shoes anymore. You used to be able to generate quite a spark if you really put your mind to it. When I was a kid, I did that frequently, which always was a total mystery to me, is how in the world can this happen? What did I do? As I think about it as a rather old adult that's kind of physically become a wreck, how did I do that? What happened? What was the major predicate of it? The answer is the action of my shoe leather. I don't understand that. Now I got cut off. You can track without a script here. I do have papers in much more science-y than what I'm doing right now. Am I back on? I'm not sure. How does it transmit itself? Such as a manifestation of light, that form of energy. How does it transit? And the answer is, looked at a fundamental level and discussing all of the known rules and regulations, is it's manifesting by its own self. Because if you remember, I said earlier, energy exists everywhere and everywhen. The certain actions of certain kinds of matter, or for all I know, all of them, under the right stimulus protocol, create a distortion in that continuum. Call it an n-dimensional continuum. In other words, n-dimensional, non-dimensional. That signal is coming from, that's where beauty and the symmetry of numbers. They work very well, but they don't always tell you the truth of anything, especially when you apply them to a preconceived expectation, which is something is moving. This is moving. This energy is moving from a source to the observer. My contention is, no, it is not. That source, as long as it has a disturbance at the source, capable of exciting the metric of visible light that we see, that we perceive, it's at the source. It's a push factor, for want of a better adjective. Just call it a push. This push is occurring not in our three-dimensional time and space reality and matter. No, it's occurring in the n-dimensional reality of energy. It doesn't actually move in any conventional sense from origin to wherever. That's not what is occurring. It is being actualized by the actions at the source, and you observe it. And however much is occurring at the source, that's how much disturbance there will be at quite some distance from the source. But that mandate of light is not coming from the object itself. It's coming from the dimension of energy. That's why it's so difficult to detect photons or trap them. How do you trap them? Why is it some of this energy is manifested and other forms of it are not, depending on how close you are to the source? The greater the distance, the less thermal interaction there is from the interaction of matter. That's a matter function. That's not non-dimensional function. Heat. I came to the gradual opinion that there is no exhaustion involved until the matter itself ceases whatever it is it is doing, that particular function. I really should have brought some of my notes and papers here to look at instead of just freelancing this. But as I said, I'm very ill. And it's starting to manifest itself mentally as well. I'm not making good decisions. I thought on this for 23 years. It's the first time I've ever done anything really significant about it. So, where was I? Go into the visual cortex in your mind, and your mind is translating light into something comprehensible to it. And it does that all the time. I see a yellow sun, you see a yellow sun. I see a blue sky, you see a blue sky. I see green grass, you see green grass. I see a blue sea, you see a blue sea, and occasionally green. And the answer is our minds are differentiating that energy spectrum to make sense for us to be able to see. If it didn't, and you had the eyes of an insect, it would be ultimate white, ultimate dark, and possibly shades of gray to detect motion. That'd be all. You wouldn't be able to see anything. Leaves look green to me on a tree, when in reality, we know they aren't. They're every color. They just become manifested depending on the amount of sunlight available. So it's not true that they're always green and then they're not green anymore. No, they're always green, just don't perceive it. Depends on which cells are most active in the leaf itself via the external stimulus of light. And of course, to a lesser effect, warmth. Our eyes see a blue sky, and yet after a very heavy rain, you go outside, you can't see anything. You see a clear sky. What happened? How did the color change? How's that possible? The answer is you're seeing the sky as it really is, not the way we usually see it, blue. That's the way it really is. It's ultimate clear. What we see is varying degrees of dirt, dust, chemical reactions, various organic compounds, as well as gases and so on and so forth that react differently to stimulus. They give off different colors, or so we think. That's just what we think. In reality, our minds are creating the colors. There is no such thing as color. That's why some minds can see various colors and others can't. Dogs cannot see hundreds or perhaps thousands of color gradient variations. They can see some of the primary colors, but not all the various gradients of them. Only when it's intense, such as construction orange, that type of thing, warning sign. They can see that. Bright red, very bright red, they can see that, sure. Tail lights on a car, yes, they see that. That they don't see the gradient in color that we do. How can that be? They should be able to see it. They're pretty smart. They're mammals just like we are. They'd be able to see it, and they don't. Some mammals apparently can see considerable more gradations and color variations than we can, or the same as we do. And that's another topic entirely. The point I'm trying to make is that a lot of what we think is real and accepted as real is not real. It's just how we perceive it. And sometimes how we perceive things becomes doctrine by mutual acceptance. We all experience the same thing. We see pretty much all the same things. We feel pretty much all the same things. We can smell ozone in the air. We can feel it affecting the hair on our skin. That type of thing for an oncoming storm. It's accepted. What's actually happened may not be that at all, but that's the way we perceive it. We perceive water, when in fact you put it in a glass, it's clear. It's not clear in the ocean because of all of the various organics and chemicals in it, and the way the sun enters it at various angles at various times of day. At night, you shine a flashlight on it with a lot of powerful penetrating. It's not blue at all. Not at all. How to change color? Answer: it didn't. Our perception of it has changed based on the visual range field, which is now restricted to a column of emitted light from a flashlight. I mean, you wouldn't like a 5-gallon jug of water in your cooler that appeared to have various colors in it, would you? No, you wouldn't like that a bit. You want it crystal clear, like glass. Moving on, just to touch lightly on something. I wondered about, how does gravity work? Where does it come from? How is it possible? I don't think you need to look at anything in the far depths of space to figure gravity out. The answers are right here. Ourselves and the moon, the planets, and our star, our sun. The answers, it reveals every answer you need to know right here. Never mind what's going on X amount of light years, supposedly, going on with all these emitted photons traveling through deep space and finally reaching us, so we can record it or observe it or comment on it and reflect on its various qualities and aspects thereof. Oh, red penetrates far deeper than anything else. No, it doesn't. It's exactly the same. It's just the way we perceive it. There is no greater or lesser velocity because there's no velocity involved, and there never was. You're seeing it as is, how is. When the source stops, that light stops. The manifestation of it, regardless of what range you are, how great the distance it is from the source. It ceased traveling because it's in its own dimension. It doesn't need to transit. The speed of light is nothing. That's what it is, nothing. It doesn't move. It doesn't have to, because its potential is everywhere and everywhen under a given circumstance. The given circumstance being, is there something, actions of matter there, great enough to manifest light? Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. Okay, back to gravity. How come the moon doesn't do one of two things? Crash into the earth or fly out into deep space, which it should do. Right angle momentum says it should fly out into space. How come tiny Mercury has not been pulled into the sun after these, what we believe to be billions of years? It should. As a matter of fact, it skips up and down, almost in a yo-yo fashion, as it orbits the sun. Our moon is very huge compared to most moons, I mean, other planets. How come it doesn't crash into the earth? It should, logically. Logic dictates, mathematics dictate that should degrade over time until it falls into the earth to impact it in some way, either head on or a glancing blow or some combinations thereof. How come it doesn't? Answer? I found the answer. The answer is gravity is a constant everywhere and everywhen in the observable universe. I'll repeat that. Gravity is a constant. It's a constant feature made manifest by the presence of matter. If the entire universe consisted of one molecule of matter, or even one atom, would there still be matter in the universe? Yes. Would there still be gravity in the universe? Yes. That little atom, that little molecule, whatever size you want to make it, would still have gravity affecting it. It would sit exactly where it is for all eternity, is basically what would happen. All of it. Time has, our concepts of time don't apply to mass and matter the way we measure it. We measure it to make things comprehensible to us, but to superimpose that on the external reality doesn't always work well. It leads to false conclusions. Okay, where was it? The moon. The moon doesn't go anywhere because it can't. It's being checked by both its gravity and the gravity which surrounds it all the time, just as it does everywhere. As long as matter exists, there's going to be a counterforce like this, always locked together eternally. That's why it doesn't fly away. That's why it doesn't crash into the earth. That's why the earth doesn't draw it in. Gravity itself and the distortion of internal gravity and external gravity, which would be quantum gravity or n-dimensional gravity, depending on what adjectives you want to apply to this unknown state of both energy and gravity. We don't perceive it as a rule. In other words, if you don't extrapolate that, you'll never find it. You look in front of you and you look down toward your shoes as you stand up, and what don't you see? You don't see your nose, despite the fact that it's occupying about 25% of that field of view looking down. Your nose doesn't appear. Your mind is blanking it out so you can see properly, so you can make a stereoscopic image mesh seamlessly. When in fact, your nose is in there protruding out quite a bit. It's right there. You don't see it, but it's there. It's always there. It's always been there. It's always in your field of view. I'm starting to lose focus here because my leg hurts pretty bad. Time. That's another one of my favorites, time. Does time exist as an entity of self? And the answer is no. Time is a numeric system that we have applied over centuries, thousands of years, towards movement, superimposing time onto movement in order to be able to make a proper calculation. Well, how long is it going to take to sail from Micronesia to Hawaii? We used to do that just by measuring how many suns or how many moons occurred over a certain given amount of transit. Now we use high quality chronometers, which now is passe and gone to computers. We got sat navs and all that good stuff that tell us precisely down to the square centimeter of where we are on the planet and where something else is that we want to get to that's been plotted in. And it'll pretty much let us know that we maintain course and heading and predetermined speed plus or minus a value of maybe 5% because of weather-related speed, the degradation, and so on. You'll know just about if you're supposed to be in Honolulu at 7:10 a.m. on a certain day, you'll be there. You don't have to guess anymore. Do the seasons know what time it is? No. It's mandated by our sun more than any other single factor. When I was a kid, speaking of the sun, it was believed the late 1950s, early 60s. Oh, great glacier formations, many miles thick, gouged out the canyons for the Great Lakes, all of them, which is probably one of the more absurd things that I've ever heard. But it was assumed, since we had nothing else to work on, well, it must have been ice that carved it out as the ice sheets withdrew and draw back or came forward and then drew back. That's not true. It was never true because there's no way to accumulate that much ice. The weather's not static enough for that much ice to form and not melt. It won't happen. Fortunately, you get to the equator and the axis tilt of the Earth, which apparently it's always had a tilted axis, won't allow that. So weather patterns emerge, dominant weather patterns that are more temperature regulated than anything else. They keep the atmosphere, the oceans, the land masses, so on and so forth, fairly stable temperatures. Lately, no, but that's because of our influence. It has nothing to do with celestial mechanics. There's no Mayan doomsday occurring, none of that. They didn't know anything. They just thought they did. With regard to time, say, you're wrong, Jerry. You're wrong, Mr. Nightingale, Mr. Smarty Pants, you befuddled old man. You're wrong, because triangulation proves time exists, because the time on this watch on Mars is not the same as it was when it started off from Earth. It's not showing the same time, it's not showing the right day, and it's not showing the right month, which some watches feature. I kind of like those. Unfortunately, I don't have one. I have a really difficult time setting them. I keep clicking and clicking the little crystals, the little stem winder and everything. I never can get them to work right. I get really tired with that in a hurry. And the same watch, the sister watch that's on orbit around Earth, both precisely the same scientifically mandated timepieces, they're different from each other. They're showing different times, different days, different weeks, different months. Theoretically, we went out far enough and show different years. So therefore, time is true. Yeah, it's time and true relative to where you observe it. That's the critical factor that's being missed. It's true to where you observe it. Because it's a device. It measures things. That measure can change. You fly a jet fast enough around the world, opposite the Earth's rotation, with a really high quality mechanical timepiece, it will slow compared to its twin timepiece that never left where the high-speed aircraft took off from. There'd be quite a significant difference in recorded time. One watch will be apparently slower than the other. The time degraded because of velocity. No, it degraded because gravitational effects came into play by adding more and more velocity to that watch aboard a jet airplane. That's what happened. Its mass expanded or contracted very, very slightly. You're talking about a very accurate mechanical timepiece. Yeah, that'll affect it. And you do it long enough, fly around the world at high speed for 24 hours, yeah, it'll show a difference between those two timepieces. But that has to do with the matter and mass of the timepiece itself, not variation in time. There is no variation in time because time is not a formal energy state. is not a state of self. It doesn't exist as a true thing. That somehow, somewhere, there's a master timekeeper. No. We just think that. We want that to be true so we can measure things. Makes sense to a logical, linear mode of thinking. If that's true, and it is true, and my idea of gravity existing in its own dimension is true, such as I said concerning the moon, and which also applies to the Earth, of course, and any other celestial body, is that there's gravity here with the moon, there's gravity here with the Earth. Those two gravities are not only reacting to each other, those gravimetric components, they're reacting to external gravimetric components. They can't escape gravity. There is no escape from gravity. If you're thinking you can build a ship that will outrun gravity, and the answer is no, because the ship itself has to have gravity. If there were no gravity, you know what would happen, regardless of how much force you applied to something? It wouldn't move. If you could subtract, say, gravity from a bullet fired from a gun in space, got your trusty six-shooter out, let off a magnum in space, would it go faster? If it didn't have any gravity, if the bullet had no gravity, it's still a bullet, it still has all its mass, but the gravity's been negated for it, just as a thought process. What would happen? The answer is bullet won't move. It can't move. No matter how much force you apply, it can't move. It simply can't. There's no incentive for it to move because now, regardless of its mass, it has no gravimetric component to interact with an external gravimetric component, independent of matter itself. In other words, gravity is not contained within an object, and then this surrounds it. No, it's all the way, it's this, all the way through, everywhere, and it's a constant. As long as that matter exists, it will always function in a gravity environment, regardless of any other matter involved. I'm not talking about mass attraction here. That's a different one. That has to do with complex mechanical aspects, far more than it does with gravity. Gravity is not forcing things together, nor does it force them apart. That's applied motion from some other physical structure, or perhaps an enormous amount of energy being manifested. Yeah, that say blow up the Earth, that type of thing. One of my favorite sci-fi topics, blowing things up. Very entertaining. Can't happen. Like the thing of a giant meteor, comet, whatever hits the Earth at near light velocity, which would be a good trick since, as I said earlier, light has no velocity. There's also nothing to stimulate that mass coming in from deep space to make it gain more and more velocity or maintain a constant velocity. It'll slow down sooner or later because it's interacting with gravity all the time, all its existence. Even if you reduce it down to atoms, those atoms would still interact with gravity. There'd be one atom unit of gravity, which is equal to one atom unit of external gravity. If you can, it's more like an n-dimensional membrane process. It has its internal gravity and external gravity that exists. That external gravity can't be detected, like, say, looking for gravity waves, you're never going to find any. And because there's nothing there to find, it has no mass and no matter of itself. Without any mass or matter, there's nothing to detect. There's nothing there. Especially when all you had to do is look right in front of your face and look at the moon. Or throw a rock. That'll teach you far more about gravity. You know, if I could build a spaceship with unlimited fuel supply, and launch it out of my backyard and go to the moon doing 1 mile per hour, would it work? Sure, it would. It'd take a lot of fuel, but it would do it. It'd take me about 250,000 hours to get there. A little more, a little less, but I get there eventually. I think I'd better pack a big lunch and maybe one of those porta potty things too, and a lot of oxygen. Yeah, and maybe something to read. Bring my DVD collection or whatever, because I'm really going to get bored. It's going to take us a long time, 250,000 hours. The question being is, could you do it? And the answer is sure. As long as you're applying thrust, force to that object. If I threw a rock toward the moon and it could maintain that same momentum that I imparted to it in motion, it would hit the moon eventually. Take a long time, but it would do it. Take less than 250,000 hours, I know that, to travel the average transit, depending on where the moon is in relation to Earth at that particular juncture when it hit. Could be longer, could be less, because it's somewhat elongated in the orbit process around the Earth. Kind of egg-shaped a little. So we discussed gravity. I'm basically stating gravity exists of itself in its own dimension. Energy exists of itself in its own dimension. As the Twilight Zone used to say, a time and place where basically it's unceasing. Nothing happens. It just exists by itself. How it came to be, that's an excellent question I don't have an answer for. But obviously, I don't agree with the Big Bang Theory at all. I think it's an absurdity. It's like saying God spoke, let there be light. It's the same thing as that. No, I don't agree with that at all. At all. How things came to exist in the first instance, I have no answer to that either. Couldn't even hazard to guess. I can tell you where I think the planets in our solar system came from. As the sun slowly condensed from a vast plasma cloud and started turning on its own axis, the heavier elements congregated and got spat out from the equator of the sun, rather like watermelon seeds, pumpkin seeds, just whip, and they went flying across with however much impetus they had, depending on their relative densities. They simply flew out, and as soon as they lost their momentum, they stayed right where they were. And gradually, even the weak gravity interaction of the sun with those planetary bodies caused them to start orbiting. It was probably a very slow process. I wouldn't wait around to see how long it took, put it that way. You better bring a lot of books with you while you're waiting to see the action and reaction occur. It's going to take a long time. How come tiny Mercury, like I said before, doesn't get pulled into the sun? The answer is gravity's holding it back. How come it doesn't gain or lose velocity since there's no impetus? Answer, once again, gravity. Internal and external gravity. It's acting as both an accelerant and a brake at the same instant. Its velocity is determined by its size and the composition of mass. How much mass does it have in situ? How much is there? What is it? Is it solid iron? Is it helium? Yeah, that's going to affect it quite a bit. I don't want to venture too far out of conventional thinking. I'm already way past the borderline on that. I'm off into schizophrenia-ville onto that one. Because everything I've said runs completely counter to equating atoms as little tiny charcoal briquettes giving off energy, because they've been stimulated to give off that energy, which even on its face, finding fissile material is kind of odd. Looking for uranium, pitch blende, so on and so forth. Aha, we got some. This is going to be a good extraction. Okay. We estimate, based on what we see on current readings of the Geiger counter, how old this is. Really? When do you think it was deposited? No, sometime around the dinosaur era, say 65 million years ago, or 30 million, or 20 million years ago. Fine. How old is the contrast strata that uranium pitchblende ore is in? Or radium? How old is that? Maybe 25,000 years. Really? So they both came up from the Earth at the same juncture, or independently of each other? The surrounding rock matrix that fused with this radium or uranium as it cooled to condense for what was already there. Because they surely could not have emerged from various strata inside the Earth at the same point in time when you say that the sedimentary strata around it is less than 50,000 years old. And certainly, uranium's got to be pretty new, wouldn't you think? Along with plutonium, uranium, radium, so on and so forth, thorium, whatever. They got to be pretty new, wouldn't you say? I would have to think so, because it decays over time. So how did it come up, say, from the center of the Earth's core, where it was created, or something in the outer mantle, and gradually came up to the surface? How long has it been on the surface? It should be basically functionally inert in terms of radioactivity, because none of the surrounding strata is that old. So something's going on. What's going on is the interaction of matter occurs over so many cycles because of its own internal stimulus. It's activating some dimensional portion of energy that is very potent in terms of others. In other words, it's a solid state. In other words, it's always present because the internal components, these crystals and so on and so forth, are always interacting with each other, right? And that in turn creates a radioactive spectrum that we built machines to specifically detect that. Gotta adjust my chair a little bit. My foot's starting to hurt really bad if I stay in one position too long. I'm sitting on about 3 pillows right now to try and keep the pressure off of those veins, which only works for a certain period of time. Where was it? Oh yes, radioactive materials. How old are they? They can only be X amount of years old, or you wouldn't be able to detect them. How do they get formed deep in the Earth and come up all the way through the Earth without being, let's say, in a hotbed of volcanic activity? Where'd it come from? We don't know. How old is it? We don't know that either. We're guessing. It's a guess. Everything's a guess. All of modern physics is a guess. All of practical applied mechanics is a guess. We think this will work because we've done it many times before and it always worked. It'll probably, this nut and this bolt will hold these two pieces of metal together very nicely. They can withstand a lot of stress because we tested it many times under various stress loads, and it works pretty good. It's not going to fail. Now, do a million cycles of applied pressure and shearing and torque forces to it, we can't guarantee it after that point. It's going to fail. Crack propagation and just a general degradation of the crystal and lattice work inside the metals we use has now degraded to the point of where it no longer has what it once possessed. It doesn't have anywhere near as much tensile strength. In fact, at a given time, it'll turn into dust or metal particulates. To go back from whence it came from when we first scooped it out of the ground. Yeah, now I'm losing focus again. I do that now, I notice. I can talk endlessly, but I lose focus on what in the hell I'm talking about. Because there's so much of it to touch on. We touched on time. Is time real? No. Time is a numerical application that we put to things. So we can keep things orderly, and everybody agrees today's Tuesday. Yeah. Except people on the other side of the world say, no, it's not Tuesday, it's Wednesday for us. Where you're at, it's pitch dark. Where we're at, I had to get out of the sun because I was trying to go out and get some rays, and I started burning up, and I had to come back in the house. So yeah, it's been light quite a bit for us. So that's wrong. Well, that's okay. We'll adjust it then to compensate for Earth's rotation. Okay, we do that. Okay, and it works pretty well. Is it a true reality? No, it isn't. You can't say time changes from one zone to another. It's an arbitrary factor that we applied on it. It's the same time everywhere on Earth all the time. It's the same time in space all the time. There is no time. There's only an instant of now, and that's all. That's all. Matter is in a constant state of transition all the time. Haha. To put a numerical concept in it. It's in a state of change constantly. It never stops. It might be very slow by our standards. If I had, let's say, one teeny tiny atom of whatever, material X, okay, and then I state, well, it only makes one revolution in its axial rotation once every million years. Well, that's so little, really doesn't mean anything. And the answer is, yeah, it does. It wouldn't matter if it's a million years, a day, or a billion years, or 10 billion years, or a trillion. It's still moving. It's so slow we can't perceive it, but it is moving. Much of what we think is not moving is, oh yeah, it's moving. I can walk up to the Chrysler building and push it. And guess what? The other side of the building has an equal and opposite reaction to the amount of force I applied to it. It's going to bulge slightly on the outside. You and I can't detect it. Even the finest mechanical devices can't detect it, but a laser could, if you had them supremely balanced well enough. Yeah, it'll measure it, sure. You look at the Chrysler building or Empire State or Statue of Liberty. Is Liberty waving her torch? The answer is yes. She does it all the time. You just can't see it because the motion is so minute. If you recorded it for, let's say, 24 hours under the purpose-built lights and purpose-built mechanical devices, once again back to lasers, would they know? Oh yeah, they showed up. Yeah, have it translated into a flow chart with a squiggly needle making peaks and valleys. Oh yeah, they show up. Sure, she's waving her torch all the time. Every time the wind blows, that torch moves in response to it. You just can't see it. You can't feel it either. It's too big. It balances out with everything else around you. It's like you never think about balancing. You just do it. When in reality, it's incredibly hard to make a vertical organism like us with our weird bone structures, completely oversized heads, stand upright. We should fall over, especially if you try to move. A lot of people think, I can't, I don't understand mathematics. Well, no, the thinking part of your mind doesn't understand it. With your organic brain that controls everything in the back of your head, it understands it perfectly. Calculus didn't create itself, and neither did trigonometry. None of that. You can do all those things every time you ride a bicycle. Something no computers on Earth, all of them together, all hooked together, could not ride a bicycle without it immediately toppling over. Because no matter how much input they have, they cannot integrate past, present, and future tenses all at the same instant. And your mind does it all the time without you ever thinking about it. Your mind's analyzing the degree of turn, angle, road surface condition, decreasing and increasing velocities, so on and so forth. And you do it all the time. You do it all the time when you walk, constantly. Otherwise, you'd fall over. It's as simple as that. Because you can't react fast enough. You're doing reactions in advance of an actual occurrence. Your mind's already compensated for the fact that you just took a step. It's used to it. It's ingrained. You automatically know how. You never have to think about it. Pretty keen. Good stuff. When you're really serious if you think about it. And over the period of maybe 25 years, especially the last, since about 99, 2000, after I read Hawking's book, the contained in a nutshell type of thing, I could count myself king of infinite time and space, though I were bound in a nutshell. That philosophy, because of what my mind's capable of doing. That got me thinking about I didn't agree with Hawking at all. I still don't agree with Hawking. And in fact, before he died, Hawking didn't even agree with Hawking. He realized that there is no way possible, no way in heaven or hell, that ultimate density equals ultimate gravity. No. There are no black holes the way we think of them as being. The sky is not falling. No. And there are no black holes. And there cannot ever be ultimate gravity. There's always just gravity. One atom unit of matter equals one atom unit of gravity. Because you're not creating nor destroying the gravity. Its presence in its own metric is everywhere, everywhen, just as energy is. You can't outrun it. Not unless you find some way to divorce yourself from this universe into some other universe where there is none, or all the rules change. Hawking realized that toward I think, about 3 years before he died. And it really must have tore his head up inside. My grand theory is now just like the broken shards of glass on the ground, what I thought was true. It can't work. There cannot be ultimate gravity. You cannot experience spaghettification and distort time and space. You can't distort time because it's not a true thing. It's not an entity of itself. It doesn't exist as a pro forma entity. You can't distort it. You can distort what you're reading on a watch or a various chronometer or some other recording device. You can distort that, sure, but not time itself, because there's no time to distort. That's strictly our perception. You can't have more gravity from lead than you do from hydrogen. If you have the same number of molecular components of this substance versus this substance, the only difference being is that this is denser than this. This is denser. This is not the same. Despite the fact that they're, let's say carbon. I compact a square mile of carbon a mile square, into something the size of a marble. Does it have more gravity? No. It has the same gravity it always had. It'd be, and it wouldn't weigh any more than it ever did. That's the important distinction. Matter cannot influence gravity. Gravity can influence matter, but matter doesn't influence gravity in that way. It's not a quid pro quo scenario. That's not how it works. It's never been how it works. It can't be how it works. When I was a kid, and I used to read amazing fiction, amazing science, popular mechanics, that was all very popular in its day. And for all I know, it still is. I haven't seen a magazine in a long, long time. Even newspapers are getting to be a rarity, other than flyer type things like a Nifty Nickel or Thrifty Eagle or whatever, one of those type of things. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, weights and measures and so on. Hawking seemed to think that as molecules and atoms drew in closer and closer proximity to each other, to where you're basically crossing the boundaries of real matter and going into some unknown state of matter, some new form of matter caused by its ultimate density. That is so ultimate, even its own light can't escape, which is nonsense. You can't affect light because it has no matter. None. It never had any matter. That's why that old trick of the split screen, one side shows wave function, the other side shows particle function. Well, it's showing that because you designed the test to work that way. What you expected to see, guess what? You got what you expected to see. That has to do with the material and the way you constructed it to interpret a value system. And it worked just the way you thought it would. You already knew it would. Hawking's extrapolation, well, ultimate gravity, if you have ultimate density, you must surely have ultimate gravity. This ultimate gravity would be so powerful that anything caught within its sphere of influence, which by its inherent implication would be a rather small radius, it would be so close to the surface, in essence, it wouldn't have any gravity unless you actually physically touch down on it, whatever this object is. Then you would presumably perceive it and be instantly reduced into some type of a viscous liquid, one molecule thick of water, that type of thing. And it's nonsense. It cannot work that way. It has never worked that way. A ton of lead in space, far from Earth's gravity and the moon's, is still a ton of lead. If it were on Earth, it'd be a ton of lead. If it were on the sun, the way we measure it would not be the same way the sun would measure it. It would be like a fly speck to the sun. It used to be popular, as I mentioned, those magazines. If you took a tablespoon of the sun's matter and could magically transport to Earth and turn the spoon over, let it spill out, it'd go right through the Earth, zip right through it. While considering the principal components are considered to be hydrogen and helium, I know exactly what it would do. It'd be in the atmosphere just like all the hydrogen and helium in there. Because now it's applicable to the Earth and not the sun. It's not the same forces, same dynamics on it. And it was just helium and hydrogen on the sun too. It's just there's a lot of it concentrated in one area, a very great deal of it. Here's an interesting question. Suppose you weigh 200 pounds on Earth. Suppose you could magically transport yourself to the sun and presumably at some point find a somewhat solid surface to stand on. And you're immune to the heat factors and radiant factors and so on and so forth. But gravity's still there. You left that one. Your magic transport still leaves you gravity. How much would you weigh on the sun? Would it be more or less? Considering that your mass and matter hasn't changed, you're still, say, 5'10" or whatever height you are, and you're still 200 pounds, and you land on the sun, guess what? As far as the sun's gravity is concerned, you're a fly speck, if that. You're going to be able to play some amazing basketball, that's for sure. You're going to set world land speed records in moving if you don't trip. Because you don't weigh anything. You don't weigh anything because of the prorated surface. All of the sun's gravity is prorated over its entire surface volume, everywhere, curvilinear. It is not greater here and then lesser over there. It's the same. Are you keeping up? I know this gets boring, but try and stay with me. You say, well, that's impossible. Sun has much more. I didn't say the sun didn't have, of course it has more gravity. It has more potential expressed gravity than anything else in our solar system. Far more, much more. But you can't defeat Einstein's theorem of co-equivalence in values and inverse proportional values. Can't throw those out the window and say gravity's going to do this and gravity's going to do that. No, because it's proportional to the entire mass, all of it. That's 1,000,000 times larger than Earth. So ergo, numerically speaking, from a mathematical model, I weigh 1,000,000 times more on the sun than I did on Earth. No, I don't. I'm the same mass and matter I always had. No, I haven't eaten that many ho-hos or that many pizzas. I haven't gained that much weight. I'm not as thin as I would like, which I think is going to change radically soon, because I'm having a difficult time facing two prospects: pain, crippling 24/7, and the fact that I can't walk even barely in my house anymore. I can't even go shopping. I have to have somebody go shopping for me and bring me something home. I can't leave my house. This is not fun. At 68, I have no intention of being a full-time cripple, degrading to where I can't move. Hawking can tolerate it. I can't. I won't. I don't like it. I don't enjoy it. I can't just exist in my head. I have a body and I want to be able to use it. And if I can't use it, then there's no point in going on. Okay, we're worried. 1,000,000 times more gravity on the sun. Yeah, there's 1,000,000% more gravity, prorated over surface area. Otherwise, tiny Mercury wouldn't have existed for very long. A few thousand years, it would have been gone. It would have been sucked in, because the closer its orbit came to the sun, which actually rather resembles a daisy petal, where it goes in, comes out, goes in, comes out, goes in, comes out. How does it do that? What's creating that motion? Answer: its own gravity with square velocity combined with external gravity, dimensional gravity in its own metric. That's why it doesn't get pulled in. Otherwise, it would have been pulled in, or it would just escape and just go flying off into the universe somewhere on an extended vacation, whatever the universe equivalent is of Cabo San Lucas, and just take a nice vacation somewhere. Why force to up? No, because they all emanated from the equatorial region on the sun, its center, because that's where it experienced the greatest velocity. Is bigger. That's its thickest point right there, like Earth or any other circular body. For velocity, and that's how mechanical expressions of gravity work. Like I said, practically nothing. Presuming I'm immune to the effects and I can still breathe and so on and so forth, eating some Taco Bell everywhere the same. As a matter of fact, I saw a, no, you're not. You can't think at all. All you can do is recite things like a parrot. Cartoon man goes down, full. Yeah, that was humorous. Stop it. It's either that or no, don't. The moon cannot simply